Hi, everyone. So thankful you could join us today. I'm so thrilled because not only do you get to meet an amazing sister, but she is from an incredible community of religious sisters you probably never heard of. So I can't wait for you to hear more about that community through Sister Brigid Mary. Thank you for joining us today.
Thank you for having me, Rhonda.
So we would love to get to know more about you first before we jump into consecrated life. Did you tell us about how you grew up?
Sure. So I am the baby in the family. I'm the only girl, and I have two older brothers. And I was born in Florida, but then pretty much just grew up in Colorado. My mom and my dad divorced when I was 4 years old. And then my mom remarried when I was 6 years old. So my father, who I really knew, was my stepdad, and he was a good man and just a good dad. And so my family was very close. The divorce had brought some difficult tensions within the family. So, with that is always an opportunity, and the opportunity to lean more deeply into Christ and more deeply into the church and the treasury of love and protection that is there. And so my family did that. My mom and stepdad, my stepdad would go to weekly adoration. And then my mom and family, we would always go to regular mass. But, like that said, there still was, it's the church is so deep in her breadth and beauty. And so we were engaging at where we were at, but I have to say still, of the world in many ways. And so a lot of my priorities were a little topsy-turvy for a little while. I became a devoted soccer player. And I say devoted intentionally. It really kind of became my own faith and my own religion. And especially, if games were on Sundays, it just had to be that I would miss mass or different things. And so the depth and the love and gratitude for the church and for our Lord and his mercy was always there. And I remember my mom teaching me when I was little how to read the Bible, and that she showed me her favorite passage, and she said, you need to have your own. And so mine was Hebrews 11:1, what is faith? And I just meditated with that, with St. Paul, the writer, though I think it's St. Paul, with his questioning of what is faith, and it is the assurance of things hoped for. And I loved that passage, and my stuffed animal was named Faith. And so whenever I would go through a hard time or something, my mom would always just say, just hold your faith close to you. And so all that to be said, I just had it was, kind of, unfortunately, I think a typical American upbringing. And with that too, it was beautiful. I have my brother, my middle brother, Michael, has special needs, and he was my best friend. He has autism and with slight apraxia, so he's like a stroke victim. And so he has a difficult time articulating. So I was pretty much his interpreter for a good portion of his life before he was able to develop the motor skills to be able to be understood even by our own family. And so, with that too, it just our family, we were very close. And my brothers were my best friends, and they came to all my soccer games, and we supported each other in everything that we went through. And so Michael actually really taught us, my brother with special needs, taught us the depth of Christ and redemptive suffering in a way that I would have never learned without him. And he because of his nonverbal demeanor, he was kind of pushed off in school. The teachers wouldn't always pay him attention. He got lost a lot, and we'd get calls of Michael's lost in high school again. He just he was kind of a misfit in some ways in that sense. And so because of that, he really had a depth in his spiritual life that as a family we didn't really quite yet know until one day Michael just started crying, and my brother was holding him, and Michael said, "Michael handicapped. Michael die on the cross with Jesus." And when he said that, it was like for all of us, our whole family rallied, and we realized, one, what my brother was experiencing, but two, what we were being invited into experience with him. And so Michael taught me the meaning of Christ on the cross, but through love and joy and patience and perseverance. And so anyway, all that to say, that was pretty much a jumbled look into my own childhood before I went off into college. And so I was very protected by, like I just was encased really by my family. And so college was eye-opening for me. I played Division I soccer, and all my dreams were coming true. I'd always wanted to play Division I, and here I was. And I'll never forget going to the first, it was a kind of a soccer team building party before one of our first games, and it was freshman fall. And the senior on the soccer team, when I walked into her apartment, saw me wearing my crucifix, and she pulled it out from my chest and said, "What are you doing here with this on?" And she said, "Either you take it off or you go back to your dorm room." And she was a captain, and so when that happened, it was like for me that I never saw that coming. And the question, no matter how much I understood that this was an individual, it's not representative of my team, all of that, there still was that seed in me of, if I'm going to be faithful, and if I'm going to live out a Christian witness, I'm going to be lonely, and I'm not going to have any friends. So table it. And so that, without me even fully being aware, that's what happened for a little while within my own college life, of this tension of me desiring the Lord and knowing the intimacy that I'd had with him, that was already but not yet even, and how he had to abundantly pour out graces on me despite my own unawareness of the depth I could have that was right there, but so it was even less then that I'd go to mass. So even when it could have worked, I wasn't even going, it just, but he, the hound dog of heaven, met me where he could. And so I loved medieval studies, and I was studying classics in my undergrad at Davidson was where I went. And I got into medieval early British literature, and these authors are writing about Augustine's Confessions. Well, I didn't know who Augustine was, but I thought that I should know what they're writing about, and so they talk about Boethius, and I didn't know who Boethius was, but I thought I should read, Boethius's Consolation of Philosophy a little bit more in depth. And they talked about Dante's like Divine Comedy, and I thought, well, I should read that too. I need to understand all these primary texts that these early British authors are referencing, in particular Geoffrey Chaucer, and so he was a patron for me, and I look forward to someday thanking him in heaven for him introducing the church and all her beauty to me. So really, to understand one of his poems, I had to read the letters of St. Augustine, his Confessions. Really had to dig into Scripture, and then I was reading St. Bede, and all the while for pursuit of his truth. And I came to realize, at the end of this poem that I was studying, he says, "There in the corner of the hall where love is, I saw the man of great authority." And it ended right there. And all these editors had tried to put an ending to it, saying that Geoffrey Chaucer never finished the poem. And I realized as I continued to dive into his truth that he did finish the poem, and that there was nothing left to be said once you found him. And so I didn't quite understand that as my truth, but I knew that that was his. And so I was writing this. It was an honors thesis paper. And so I'm writing this paper, grappling with that. Meanwhile, I go for a summer internship to the country of Georgia. in Tbilisi, Georgia. And I was going there to for an international law firm internship. And I didn't know Georgian. I didn't know Russian. I didn't know like anything. And I showed up there, and there was a man there at the conveyor belt for the luggage. And he said, "What are you doing here?" and I said, "Well, I'm here for an internship, but can you tell I'm American?" He's like, "You stick out like a sore thumb." And I didn't realize I was dressed in all white. I didn't realize that the Georgian people from their time of oppression, mostly dressed in quite drab colors, gray, muted, black tones. I had no idea the depression I was about to enter into. And so anyway, he offered to give me a ride. I'm thinking, okay, number one rule I learned from my mom is don't accept rides from strangers. And so I said, thanks, but no thanks. My host father will be picking me up. Now, all that to be said, I never felt unnerved by it. It just, I actually felt he was quite gracious. So driving into Tbilisi, it was ex-Soviet, so there's like it was so decrepit, and the squalor, I knew it would be third world, but third world when your soul has been crushed is something very different than third world when the church is thriving. And it's a despair that I was not prepared for. And so I would take the train in to the law firm, and would have to walk past like the amount of homelessness, but then drunken, teenagers, drugged and drunk. It was a constant hole in my heart that I couldn't fill. And so I tried to fill it the way I always filled it, first with luxury. So I found the nicest restaurant, hotel that I could go to, and I would go there for breakfast and for lunch. And I would watch the white sheets like blow in the wind with the open windows, and take in the comfort of luxury. But as soon as I left, that hole was there, and it felt bigger. And so I kept needing that luxury more and more, and like just longing to go back to that hotel. And so I started to realize, well, that's not it. So maybe I'm homesick. Maybe I just need to touch American soil. So I emailed the U.S. Embassy and asked if I could just come, that I'm a normal American. I attached my resume. I said, I'm not crazy. Like if I could just come touch American soil. The first email I got back was the U.S. Embassy is open 9 to 5, and so I deleted that. The next email I got back was from the U.S. ambassador, and he invited me to a private Marine party, and said he'd meet me at the gates. And so he brought me there, and it's true. The stepping foot on our nation's soil did bring a stability to me. And there also was providence in it. When I arrived, I heard this voice behind me say, "What are you doing here?" And I turned around, and it was that man from the airport. And I said, "Well, what are you doing here?" And it turns out he was a 4-star general. And so I said, "Well, all the more, what are you doing here in like the country of Georgia?" And he said, "Well, I'm here to train Georgian soldiers." And I said, "Yeah, why on earth is America sending a 4-star general to train Georgian soldiers?" And he said, "Well, per capita, there are X number of Georgian soldiers who are assisting in the Iraq war. And it's the largest amount of all the nations per capita." And I'm like, "But how many is that?" He's like, "Well, it's like 50 or something." So that doesn't make sense. He ended up telling me there wasn't another answer he could give me. That was the summer that Russia invaded Georgia. And I later understood why a 4-star general was training Georgian soldiers. So anyway, that to be said, I left the embassy, and again, that hole was there. All the while, I haven't gone to mass. And finally, I told my host family, I've got to go to church. And so they took me to St. Peter and St. Paul Church on the feast of St. Peter of St. Paul in the year of St. Paul. I didn't know any of this. I only later have put it together in Providence and realized, our Lord's tender mercy in it all. So I showed up to the mass, and I went in, and the pews were sticky. My legs stuck to the pews, and the people sitting next to me smelled. And so I literally was just sitting there like pinned levitating off the pew, but not because of anything holy, and just not really present. And the priest said, for the homily, I want you to look to the person to your right. Okay. So I did. He said, I want you to look to the person to your left. He said, I want you to touch the pew you're sitting in. You have got to be kidding me. So I touched the pew I was sitting in. And he said, I was the pastor here during Soviet rule. And I watched every Sunday a comrade walk into the back of the church with a clipboard. And he'd take down the names of every parishioner who was attending Mass. And every Sunday we knew that they would return to their apartments and they would be ransacked, that their grandparents who were too elderly to come to Mass would be missing, or that they themselves would go missing. He said, and yet every Sunday the pews were filled. And for those who didn't come back, it wasn't because they didn't want to, but because they couldn't. And then he looked right at me in a way that like was just piercing. And he said, somebody died to sit in the pew you're sitting in. What are you doing with your faith? And that was the revolution for my soul. And I walked out of there and it was like the hole was forever filled. And I found the man of great authority. And so then began the journey of, well, what does this mean? So I returned home different. And I had my senior year of college, but it's just everything was turning in me of me searching for Christ and yet feeling him so near and not understanding what he was saying. And so when I graduated, I started going to daily Mass and daily adoration, and had to teach myself how to be silent. I did not know how to be silent. And I finally said in the silence, tell me who I am. And I said, don't tell me I'm beautiful. Don't tell me I'm your daughter. Don't tell me like all these things I wanted to hear. And I listed them all out, and I took a long time listing them all out. And I heard very clearly back, are you finished? And I said, no, I'm not finished. But I couldn't think of anything else. And I sat in the silence for a little while, and then I heard, okay, you are mine. And I knew instantly. I never thought to say, don't tell me I'm yours. And that was the desire of my heart, to be his. And so then began the next question of, what does this mean for me? And I, through a family friend, then also my spiritual director, Bishop Conley, at the time he was the apostolic administrator in Denver, I went to meet him, and he gave me a list of religious orders that he wanted me to research, 5 of them. And he said, but first, I really think you should research the Religious Sisters of Mercy of Alma, Michigan. And right when he said that, his cell phone rang. And he said, I'm sorry, I have to get this. I've been trying to get a hold of this sister. We're planning a liturgy together. It's for a white Mass for physicians. And anyway, it was Sister Esther Mary, one of our religious sisters. And so then when he hung up, he said, I insist you have to research them. And it's kind of been a running joke every now and then that he answered my vocation for me. But the call came through him. So a family friend also put me into contact with Sister Esther Mary. And, I, for various reasons, I hesitated calling her, but thankfully this family friend also called her and told her she should call me as well. So she called me. And my first meeting with her, it was like every door in my heart had opened. And there was this breath of just this wind that had come into my life. I felt like the only explanation I could give her was I felt like I was just skydiving in the Lord. And so when I went back to journal that night, all I could draw was a stick figure and wind around me. Like I couldn't even put it to words. And so I knew to just keep walking through the doors so long as they opened. And these doors were the doors of my heart, and the Lord was opening me in ways that I didn't even know I was closed. And it was all in his mercy. So I entered in 2013. And it's just been the greatest gifts that I could have ever even dreamed of, and I never had. just to be free in him and to follow where I'm asked to follow and to run after him.
So in the next couple of minutes, tell us a little bit about the Religious Sisters of Mercy of Alma, Michigan, and why they're so special.
So when I met Sister Esther Mary, she started to explain to me about the vowed life and how we profess 4 vows: poverty, chastity, obedience, and service of the poor, sick, and ignorant. When she started to speak about the service of the poor, sick, and ignorant, that was when my heart experienced that wind. She spoke about how our life is at the service of the church, and that we see everything we do as being of service. Everything that we are, from prayer, which is our first work, to the apostolate, to washing the dishes. Now, all of that is experienced in religious life in general as well, but on a particular level, for us as Religious Sisters of Mercy, it's not only seeing those actions and activities as of service, but also seeing my insecurities, my weaknesses. We say of the poor, sick, and ignorant, that my ignorance is of service to the church, that my sickness is of service to the church, that they're everything in this life is of service. And so I think that was what really drew me. But then from that then comes a dynamic dynamic relationship within our community as sisters. So we recognize that prayer is the first work that we give back to the church, and then also our common life. And so those are 2 very important cogs in our wheel that define us. And so I think I've several bishop friends have said that your sisters are so joyful. And I really think, it's that when you've experienced the mercy of God and the freedom, you can't help but be joyful.
And so I know that some of your sisters are help in education, right? Instructing the ignorant, if you will. And some are help in the medical field, correct?
Yes. Yeah. So we have the comprehensive healthcare and recognizing the holistic health of the human person, whether it's mind, body, soul. And so, but that goes to the nimbleness of what we experience in the vow of service, because it's not, yes, we have educators. It could be a physician, a nurse practitioner. I'm in studies right now for law school, and also have a master's in bioethics. We believe in educating the mind to the fullest, so that mind can be educated, all to be back in return to the church. But all that to be said too, with that is then also the whether we're a secretary or in pastoral care, it's all a great mission, and it's exactly as the Lord is asking us to be in that moment.
And what a blessing to be a part of that great mission. So thank you so much, Sister Brigid Mary, for joining us, for sharing with us that incredible vocation testimony, and more about this order. I want you, if you're listening, you need to go look up the Religious Sisters of Mercy from Alma, Michigan, and find out more about them. So thank you so much for joining us, and God bless you for your yes. Really appreciate it.
Thank you so much. God bless you too.